Anytime you move from the previous entry of any series to the next, you get stuff that ends up left on the cutting room floor. Oftentimes, the less successful or less popular elements are left behind for new and greater things. But on some occasions, something more beloved ends up in the past. And among the content we lost in the transition from Smash 4 to Ultimate is something more complicated. Custom specials were a neat way to vary up Smash 4's gameplay by giving each character alternate versions of their B-button moves to choose from. Or at least, it was a neat idea on paper. In practice, what we ended up with was highly impractical to fully unlock, made stuff up in order to fit the quota of 2 alts per special more often than they pulled from source material, and with balancing that range from competent to problematic to clearly didn't think this through. But there was still enough interest in the concept, at least, that there was disappointment when the feature got the axe in Ultimate for everyone but the Mii fighters, since, being the highly customizable creative character is kind of their thing. Even if it was for understandable reasons with how Gigantamax sized the roster is, there are some people still left wondering what custom specials could have been like in Ultimate, or in the next Smash game, however far away that ends up being. Well, that's what we're here for. Let's take a closer look at what this sometimes controversial feature could be like with a fresh coat of paint, some more thought put in, and probably way more extra resources than the Smash devs could have feasibly devoted to it. We'll be covering a combination of newcomers who weren't around when customs were a thing, and older characters whose custom sets could benefit from a revamp. So, what I want to aim for here is quality over quantity. I think coming up with 2 alts for every special in Smash 4 ended up diluting things and giving us a few too many cookie-cutter variants in place of something more interesting. Instead, we'll be making 1 variant for each special, but having them be much more thought out and interesting enough to feel like real alternates. This will also include pulling from the character's original games if at all possible. Giving these alternates their own visual identity is a very important thing that wasn't always pulled off in Smash 4. And this gives us the added bonus of making it much easier to differentiate our designs from the specials they'll be based on. That said, they will still be variants of the current specials and not completely new ones, building off existing animations at the very least, just like Smash 4 did the vast majority of the time. I think there's an appeal to seeing a different take on an existing concept, something familiar yet new and exotic at the same time. Also, trying to give each character 8 completely different specials while still keeping true to their intended fighting style would be highly impractical and run the risk of creating a cluttered mess. And not every character needs to be the Mii fighters, What we'll be aiming for is something more or less like the customs Mega Man had. While they're all still variants of his default specials, each is visually distinct, directly inspired by other weapons or abilities from his games, and all function differently, yet in a way that still feels true to canon and true to his projectile-heavy playstyle while providing different ways to accomplish it. That's our gold standard. Let's see if we can match it. Let's begin with where Ultimate began. Inkling was the one character everyone knew was coming, and a good testing ground for our new style of custom specials since they weren't around when customs were a thing. And it doesn't hurt to have so much source material to pull alternates from. Starting at neutral, the Splattershot and its cover fire are a perfect way to demonstrate, because we can replace it with a new weapon entirely. Matching its different stat line in Splatoon proper, the Splattershot Pro would shoot at a somewhat slower rate than the rapid-fire ink of the standard neutral special, but each shot would travel a little further, deal more damage, and apply more ink per hit. Giving you more of an ability to kite your opponents while putting ink on them, the increased startup would also require you to understand when to do so. It's for expert squid kids. And in a major departure from Smash 4, the Splattershot Pro would completely replace the regular Splattershot on Inkling's model if selected. Though, since only the special itself changes, all of the hitbox and stuff on Inkling's A moves would stay the same. Which works since most of the Pro's bigger size is toward the back of the weapon anyway. On to slightly less complicated stuff, the Splat Roller has a reputation, especially online where it's way harder to shield in time and mash out if you get buried. So, good news. This alternate roller is less infuriating to deal with. Another model swap, the Carbon Roller would put its more lightweight frame to use by allowing you to move faster while it's out, covering/inking ground quicker, and providing somewhat better recovery off stage. But it would also completely lack the ability to bury opponents it runs over, meaning you'd lose the ability to cheese early stocks with it. That said, any ink you cover stage surfaces with while rolling would stick around longer, giving it greater utility at slowing down opponents who rely on grounded movement. So there's a trade-off there. The super jump's a pretty nice recovery move and all, but what if you want to, say, conditionally ignore edgeguard attempts? That is where a little interpretation of a certain ability could come in handy. Turning mostly invisible and intangible during your ascent, Stealth Jump will let you go through enemy attacks harmlessly, just like a certain Phantom Thief with his stand active. Of course, something this useful has to come with downsides, and in this case, longer startup that you're not intangible for, and no landing hitbox nor ink splatter if you go for a mix-up and land on the stage itself. The traits that hide your jump in Splatoon have a downside here. Then there's the Splat Bomb, with its ability to control stage space and force opponents to respond to its presence. But sometimes you just want some burst damage from a distance, and there's a pretty obvious ult for that. Instead of exploding on a timer, burst bombs would blow up on contact with anything just like in Splatoon, making them a more conventional zoning tool. But the trade-off is a smaller explosion that deals less damage and knockback and applies less ink when it hits, which would force you to choose something stronger and more strategic, or something more aggressive and straightforward. So that's one take on what customs could look like in Ultimate, but how about we take a shot at redoing them for someone who already had them in Smash 4? Lucario's pretty rarely played as is, and some might argue it's due to being a little too reliant on his aura gimmick. So what if he had some alternate specials that, among other things, traded some of his extremes for more stability? And that comes into play right away with his neutral special. Aura Sphere can be a terrifying threat at high levels of aura, but it's pretty lacking until you have a decent amount of damage on you. But what if there's an alternate version that was more consistent? Focus Blast would create a ball of copper-colored energy instead. You know, the color the fighting type is usually associated with. Without any kind of aura effect to speak of, it'd be the same size and power of a mid-percent aura sphere regardless of your current damage. Focus Blast would be an option to sacrifice some of Lucario's explosive KO power at high aura levels in exchange for a more consistent tool and decent KO option at low aura, which would be a godsend if you're worried about losing your stock first and having things go south. But there are other ways we can offer more stability. For example, Force Palm carries a lot of power if you land the command grab, with an energy blast afterward that's more of a consolation prize if you didn't grab someone. But what if there was a variant that focused more on the latter? Vacuum Wave would ditch the grab hitbox entirely in place of greater range and a knockback boost on the blast at the end, and new visuals where the aura would look like it's displacing the surrounding air. Like with Focus Blast, this would sacrifice one of your multitude of high aura threats, but this time you gain a pretty good spacing tool instead, allowing you to play more defensively at high percents and focus on surviving longer to use your enhanced aura with other moves. Don't worry, this next one's more simple. Extreme speed can go really far depending on your aura levels, but having a hitbox only at the end makes it iffy against aggressive edge guarding. So what if there was a version that didn't have to fear that as much? Feint wouldn't scale its distance with your aura much at all, but with an active hitbox on it the whole time you're moving. It'd also be a rare example in Ultimate of a movement-based attack that can go through shields and land on the opposite side, befitting its ability to bypass defensive moves in its home series. But it'd also have a lot of end lag if you don't grab the ledge, so use it wisely. Finally, while we could just have double teams all be a counter with different properties, I want to see if there's something more interesting we can do, courtesy of a move new to Sword and Shield. Life Dew would still trigger like a counter, but instead of vanishing and blindsiding your opponent with a kick, blocking an attack of around 12% base damage or higher would release a blast of cleansing water on the immediate area, healing you and any allies within a large radius. An unusual defensive option that shines most when you have teammates, Life Dew would be more about predicting opposing aggression and using it to give your team more sustain. The water would still knock opposing fighters away so they can't get free hits on you at least, and the knockback would still happen even if you block a weaker attack, but you'd want to save this for when you can actually get the healing off it. But we can do even more with our new take on custom specials. Some characters have abilities from their home games that, for one reason or another, didn't make it into their Smash moveset. Ike is one of them, as his sword Ragnell is actually capable of firing off waves of blue flame to strike at enemies 2 spaces away. If I remember right, Sakurai said a long time ago that he passed up on the move out of fear of Ike being too overpowered if he had a projectile on top of everything else, though it's been a while so I'm not entirely sure. But what if gaining that projectile came at the cost of losing something else? Pulling from quick draws, charging, and slashing animations, Ike stays in place and casts a wave of flame from his sword instead. A quick-moving projectile with variable distance depending on how long you charge, it'd give Ike an anti-camping tool for forcing opponents to come to him, improving his matchups against projectile zoners significantly. But since it replaced quick draw, it'd come at a dangerous cost of making his recovery much worse. A difficult decision to make, isn't it? The rest of Ike's customs, while less complicated, can still be pretty interesting. For Eruption's alternate, I decided to revamp one of the customs he had in Smash 4. Tempest does still work with our criteria here since it's inspired by the Tempest Blade weapon from Radiant Dawn, but the original's massive wind box is a no-go since a giant wind box that can smother the ledge is stupidly broken in competitive settings. Instead, we'd have Tempest create a localized windstorm surrounding Ike, lasting longer than Eruption usually does and dealing multiple hits before launching foes straight up. Still most useful as ledge pressure or trapping landings, Tempest is more about creating a big mass of hitboxes around Ike compared to Eruption reaching forward, giving them different upsides at different times in different situations. Aether's a bit lacking as a recovery move as is, and while Ike can make it work thanks to also having Quick Draw, we just kinda added the option to not run Quick Draw. And hey, sometimes you do want more secure recovery options in general. Okay, it's not very fancy, but Ike does throw a sword further in his games if Aether procs when he's not right next to his target. Distant Aether has Ike toss Ragnell in a more forward arc, then follow it before he comes back down. Sorta like the Aether Drive custom in Smash 4, but with the sword traveling further before Ike goes after it. This offers vastly better horizontal recovery on a move that lacked it before, but it comes at the cost of losing the move's offensive potential. This version would not deal multiple hits nor drag people along with it, only doing single hits that knock opponents away. You'd also still have to look out for counters, so heads up on that. And for his down special, Ike's own counter is pretty simple, and ultimately I decided to keep it that way more or less. Pulling from more modern titles with a move often given by players to Ike's various alts and Fire Emblem heroes, Quick Riposte lets him counterattack with 2 swings of his sword instead of 1. Getting a built-in follow-up ensures you'll do more damage than Ike's standard counter, but in exchange for dealing less knockback to keep it balanced. This actually makes it more useful at low percents than higher up. But our new style of customs has even more potential. One issue I have with about half of Ultimate's Echo Fighters is that they don't really do many new things with the movesets they're based on. Dark Pit is no exception, as only 2 of his moves, and his final smash, are any different. But we can use custom specials to remedy that. This way we can branch them out further and make Pit even more of a jack-of-all-trades, while Pitu can be a more aggressive take on the moveset. And those differences would become apparent from the very start with their neutral specials. Pit's Palutena Bow shoots arrows of light that he can guide to snipe opponents from all kinds of directions. For his alternate, we can give him the Fortune Bow he starts with in Kid Icarus Uprising, known as the well-balanced version of the bows in that game. Arrows knocked by the Fortune Bow would charge quicker and be even more maneuverable, in exchange for dealing a little less damage and knockback. Useful in matchups where Pit's long-range game is less important, these arrows would be better for poking at opponents from mid-range and tacking on chip damage when you have the advantage. Meanwhile, Dark Pit has the Silver Bow by default, firing arrows of darkness that are stronger and faster than Pit's, but less capable of being guided. It's a minor difference that does help give him his own identity, but what if we could take that even further? Enter the Darkness Bow, firing shots that are even stronger and faster, but can't be guided at all, only allowing him to shoot directly forward. Straight and to the point the way he likes it, it'd give Pitu a tool for aggressive yet linear zoning to force approaches with. Would work best on flat stages or matchups against opponents with linear movement, but wouldn't help as much when platforms get involved or when his opponent has a more flexible game plan. Oh, and just like the Splattershot Pro, both of these bows would completely replace their default ones for all of their animations if selected, though it'd just be a visual change with all the data for the A moves remaining the same. The duo's side specials are the other thing that makes them distinct. But again, smart use of ults can widen that gap further. Pit's Upperdash Arm gives him a burst option to punch through a single attack using super armor while also deflecting the first projectile that touches him. It's got its uses, but what if you want something without all the bells and whistles? That's where the Compact Arm comes in, a more lightweight arm that favors speed over power. With quicker startup and much faster movement, it'd practically give Pit his own Raptor boost. But with no super armor and no ability to deflect projectiles, it'd be restricted to mix-ups and punishing whiffed attacks, which can help if that's your kind of thing. Then Dark Pit's Electroshock Arm is more or less the same as Upperdash, except with slightly more damage and horizontal knockback instead of vertical. Again, enough to give some variance, but I bet we can take that further. And the key to that is the End-All Arm. Trading movement for more power, it'd have slower startup and a slower and shorter dash, but it'd hit way harder on contact, deal increased shield damage, and even have the super armor kick in earlier. Much more situational, the End-All Arm is built for hard reads when you bet your opponent will panic and throw out an attack carelessly. Easily avoided and punished if you're not smart about it, but when it hits another fighter or a shield, look out! And with that, we're at the point where their specials stop being different. The power of flight carries them a long way quickly but in a straight line and with no protective hitbox. Completely identical normally, this is our chance to give them alternates that differentiate them better. Pit's variant could give his recovery more versatility, allowing him to alter his angle mid-flight to steer around edgeguard attempts or course correct if he's about to miss the ledge. But it'd come at a cost of somewhat slower movement that'd make him easier to hit if he's too predictable with this new power. Meanwhile, Viridi could indulge Dark Pit's fighting spirit a little and give him an ult that puts a hitbox on his flight to power through edgeguard attempts or even as a burst option on stage to punish people. But it also travels significantly less distance, so it would be that much more vulnerable if he does get hit while he's off stage and might not even be able to make it back. Then we have the Guardian Orbitars, serving as the down special for both Pits. A reflector that covers both sides and pushes people away, it's got its uses, but what if we could do something that'd diversify their playstyles more? Pit's alternate could give him the Centurion Orbitars, surrounding him with two statues that resemble Palutena's Centurion soldiers. Instead of being a true reflector, they'd function more like a counter that only procs against projectiles, which doesn't sound very good until you get to the part where they retaliate with a lightning-fast magic arrow instead that's much more likely to hit far-off opponents than a reflected projectile would. It'd give Pit an anti-zoning tool that'd be another way for him to force approaches, though the counterattack would also be weaker than if you reflected a strong projectile, so there's pros and cons. But Dark Pit, if given the chance, would probably rather have something he can just hit people with, which is exactly what the Boom Orbitars would let him do. A pair of protective cannons, they'd actually deal contact damage upon appearing and open fire on their own with mid-range shots regardless of if an enemy projectile touches them. But they'd actually only block projectiles instead of reflecting them and wouldn't protect him from physical attacks at all. Gaining the option to swap his shields for cannons would allow Dark Pit to play more aggressively with his Orbitars if he chooses, stomping out approaches and overpowering opponents at mid-range, in exchange for losing most of the move's original defensive purposes and being even more punishable if he whiffs entirely. But we have one more character to cover. As if we could forget him after the grand entrance he made. Just like with Inkling, King K. Rool wasn't around for Smash 4, and so he doesn't have any existing custom specials to build off of. But it just means we'll have to pull from his various boss fights and other places to find alternates that fit the style we're looking for, and his own cartoonishly dangerous flair. K. Rool's Blunderbuss is a weird mishmash of options all in one, firing a hard-hitting cannonball that controls space with an added suction effect that can command grab opponents or even reshoot your cannonball in another direction. So how do we do something notably different with that? Turns out it's as simple as grabbing another move from the same boss fight. For this version, he'd shoot a nasty-looking spiked cannonball that deal more damage while it's airborne, and instead of just disappearing eventually, once it reaches a certain distance it'd start to fall, stopping if it hits the ground or a platform and remaining there for about another second. The downside, though, is that the suction from the blunderbuss wouldn't affect it, meaning you couldn't pull it back and reshoot. It also wouldn't go as far as a regular cannonball before starting to fall, so it would be worse at long-range combat. But its extra utility at covering stage space and harassing recoveries would give it a use all its own. And you'd still be able to catch other fighters with the suction, so there's that. Moving on, we have the classic Crown Toss. A zoning tool that hits twice and with built-in super armor that forces opponents to respect it, but if something happens to keep you from catching it on the return, then you might end up having to do without for a while. For a variant on the Crownerang, we're going to give him a different crown entirely. With a more jagged, pointier crown based on some very old concept art of him for Donkey Kong Country, K. Rool would get a projectile with some unusual properties. Traveling less distance on the toss, instead of returning immediately, it'd hang in midair and spin in place for a couple seconds instead, acting as stage control for that duration. Then when it finally returns, it aims for your current location at the time it starts coming back, turning its return trajectory into pretty much whatever you want based on where you can manage to get to while it's stopped. Functioning something more like a short-term trap, the Trick Crown would force opponents to keep an eye on both it and you to figure out what it'll do lest they get hit and comboed into one of K. Rool's hard-hitting follow-ups. But you'd also have to throw it out from mid-range to make it more effective, so it would carry more inherent risk to it. And while it tracks your position while it's spinning in place, it wouldn't home in on the return, meaning you'd still have to catch it lest you give your opponent a chance to play keep away. Oh, and if you chose this version, he'd replace his normal crown with the pointy one all the time even when you're not using this attack. Whew, that was complicated. Fortunately, the Propellerpack is a little simpler, a recovery move with a lot of vertical distance and a protective propeller that covers K. Rool from above. But what if you want something you can also use on offense? For that, we'll have K-Rool pull some parts from an old invention and make a new copter pack. In addition to a new paint job, the KAOS Kopter sports a bigger propeller and faster propulsion to go with quicker startup, making it actually a pretty decent dot-of-shield option. But with that comes worse utility, as this pack carries K-Rool significantly less distance than the regular one, making it worse as an actual recovery move and cutting into his ability to live to super high percents the way he usually does. Finally, we have another down special counter, though Gut Check is pretty unique already in being both a counter and a reflector that only works if K-Rool is hit from specifically the front. There's only so much you can do with a countering move to make it interesting, so what if it did something else instead? Tapping into the big guy's infamous ego, this version would have him take a triumphant pose after blocking a strong attack with his body armor and hype himself up so much that it actually gives him a buff to the next A attack he throws out. Losing his reflector might give K-Rool even more difficulty getting in than usual in matchups where he wants or needs to, but Golden Gut allows for a big payoff if he gets the buff and lands a follow-up. The buffed attack would even deal more shield damage too, making this move kind of a weird hybrid of revenge and psych-up. Comical, dangerous, and a bit mentally unhinged. In other words, 100% in character. And there you have it. One possible take on what custom specials could look like in Ultimate or any future Smash game for these 6 fighters. Even if I utterly lack the programming know-how to make any of this actually happen, it's still a fun thought experiment, and I hope I did these characters justice. Speaking of which, what do you think of this diversion from my usual content? Any other characters you'd be interested to see me create new custom specials for? And if you're new, check out the rest of my stuff if you're interested. I do intricate analysis and theory crafting for recent Smash news and character reveals, character concepts for potential newcomers, which sometimes become actual newcomers, and other such content. Maybe stick around and subscribe if you haven't yet. Hint, hint. Special thanks to these people here for their continued support and/or assistance. Thanks again to my patrons for everything they've contributed. If you're interested in becoming a patron yourself, check out the video description or hang around just a little longer for a direct link. And so, until next time, maybe I should come up with an alternate for these endings too.